In the quiet town of Plainfield, Wisconsin, the horizon stretches with farmlands and forests, and the air feels still, almost frozen in time. It is the kind of place where everyone knows everyone, where secrets are supposed to be hard to keep. But in 1957, a horrifying discovery shattered that illusion forever. Ed Gein was not a name that stirred fear until investigators opened the doors to his farmhouse. What they found inside shocked not only the town of Plainfield, but the entire nation. The gruesome details would carve Gein's name into the dark history of true crime, cementing him as one of the most infamous figures in America. To understand the monster that Ed Gein became, we need to look back at the beginning. Edward Theodore Gein was born August 27, 1906, the second son of George and Augusta Gein. From the outside, the family lived an ordinary rural life, but behind closed doors, the atmosphere was suffocating. Augusta ruled the household with an iron fist. She was a deeply religious woman who instilled in her children the belief that the world outside their home was corrupt, sinful, and filled with wickedness. To Augusta, women were temptresses, agents of sin, destined to drag men into eternal damnation. The only woman worth reverence in her mind was herself. George Gein, Ed's father, was the opposite. He was a weak alcoholic man who struggled to hold a job. He worked at times as a carpenter and a tanner, but he failed to provide stability for the family. Augusta despised him and made sure her children knew it. She saw herself as the sole guiding force, the one who would protect her boys from the moral corruption. For Ed, this strict, isolated upbringing left deep scars. He adored his mother and clung to her every word, absorbing her fiery sermons about morality and sin. He was socially awkward, timid, and unable to connect with others. His older brother Henry worried about his blind devotion, often challenging Augusta's dominance. Henry was skeptical of his mother's teachings and encouraged Ed to think for himself. But Ed was unmoved. He remained loyal to Augusta, almost worshiping her. When Ed was a boy, he struggled in school. Other children teased him relentlessly for his shyness, his strange mannerisms, and his awkward attempts at social interaction. He would laugh at odd moments, seemingly disconnected from reality. Teachers noticed his unusual behavior, but dismissed him as peculiar rather than dangerous. At home, Ed spent much of his time doing chores or listening to his mother's endless lectures on morality. He rarely left the farm except for school. He found solace in reading, particularly books about anatomy, death, and stories of adventure that often involved violence or macabre themes. The Geins family would grow smaller over time. When George Gein died in 1940, Augusta tightened her grip on her sons. Ed was 34 years old, but still completely dependent on his mother. He had no close friends, no romantic relationships, and no independent life. He lived only for her approval. But tension grew between Augusta and Henry. Henry did not share his brother's reverence for their mother and began to openly criticize her. In 1947, tragedy struck. While burning brush on the farm, a fire spread, and Henry was found dead under mysterious circumstances. The official cause was ruled as heart failure, but investigators noted he had bruises on his head. Ed had reported the fire and led police directly to Henry's body in a manner that raised suspicion, yet no investigation was pursued. With Henry gone, Ed was now Augusta's sole companion. He became more attached than ever. But in December of 1945, Augusta died after suffering 2 strokes. Ed was devastated. The one person he had worshipped, the center of his world, was gone, and with her death, Ed's descent into darkness accelerated. Left alone on the farm, Ed became increasingly reclusive. He sealed off much of the house, leaving his mother's room untouched as a shrine. He confined himself to a small part of the farmhouse, living in filth and isolation. He earned money through odd jobs around town and was known to be reliable, if strange. Locals saw him as harmless, an eccentric man who kept to himself. But what no one knew was that Ed was feeding obsessions that had been growing for years. He began visiting cemeteries at night, digging up freshly buried bodies and bringing them back to his farmhouse. He skinned the corpses, preserved body parts, and fashioned gruesome trophies and furniture from human remains. The details of what he created were beyond imagination. Chairs upholstered with human skin, bowls made from skulls, a belt crafted from nipples, a lampshade made from a woman's face, and most chilling of all, a skin suit designed so that Ed could literally wear the flesh of women, becoming them in some grotesque imitation of his mother. Despite the horror inside his home, Ed continued to appear normal enough to the townspeople. He was the quiet handyman, the odd but seemingly harmless man who babysat children, fixed machinery, and read pulp magazines. His obsession with anatomy and the macabre went unnoticed. The illusion shattered on November 16, 1957, when hardware store owner Bernice Worden disappeared. Her store showed signs of a struggle, and blood was on the floor. Witnesses reported that Ed Gein had been the last customer in the shop the previous evening. Police went to question him and ended up at his farmhouse. What they found would shock the nation. Inside the shed, they discovered Denise Worden's body, decapitated and hanging upside down like a slaughtered deer. She had been shot with a rifle. Inside the house, investigators uncovered the collection of human remains, grotesque artifacts made from bodies stolen from graves, and possibly from other victims. The horrors of Ed Gein's farmhouse became headlines across the country. The public would hardly believe what police had found. Journalists swarmed Plainfield, and Gein's crimes were soon immortalized into books and films. The farmhouse in Plainfield was no ordinary crime scene. Investigators had expected to find Bernice Worden, but what they stumbled into was something out of a nightmare. The moment deputies entered Ed Gein's house, the stench of decay overwhelmed them. The farmhouse was filthy, filled with rotting food, piles of junk, and layers of dirt. But it was not just the filth that horrified them. It was something hidden among the clutter. They opened drawers and found human organs. They searched cupboards and discovered bowls made from human skulls. In a corner of the kitchen sat a wastebasket covered in human skin. Hanging on the walls were masks, real human faces carefully peeled from skulls and preserved. Some were stuffed with paper to hold their shape, others crudely tacked up like trophies. In a paper bag, officers found Bernice Worden's head. Her heart was discovered in a plastic bag near the stove. The more they searched, the worse it became. They uncovered leggings sewn from human skin. They found fingernails in a tin can, a chair upholstered with human flesh, a belt fashioned entirely from nipples, a lampshade constructed out of human facial skin. And in a locked box, they discovered a suit, a full torso made from the skin of women. It had breasts, and it was designed so Ed could wear it like clothing. It was clear that he had been crafting a way to become his mother again, to climb back into her skin, to literally embody her. When police brought Ed in for questioning, he was calm, almost eerily calm. He confessed to killing Bernice Worden and also admitted to the disappearance of tavern owner Mary Hogan in 1954. Mary's head was also found in his house, but Gein insisted that most of the remains were not from women he had killed. They came from graves. He described how he would read obituaries in the local paper, then sneak into cemeteries late at night. He dug up recently buried women who reminded him of his mother. He would take bodies back to his farmhouse and use them to create grotesque objects investigators were now cataloging. The public reaction was explosive. Newspapers across the country ran headlines about the butcher of Plainfield. Reporters described his farmhouse as a house of horrors. The quiet, reclusive handyman had become a symbol of depravity. Psychologists tried to make sense of Gein's behavior. They pointed to his warped relationship with his mother, his isolation, and his obsession with anatomy. They diagnosed him with schizophrenia and other severe mental disorders. His fixation on recreating his mother through body parts revealed a disturbed mind, trapped in grief and madness. But the community was not interested in theories. They wanted justice. In 1957, Gein was charged with first-degree murder for the death of Bernice Worden. However, doctors quickly declared him insane. He was found unfit to stand trial and was committed to a mental health facility. For years, he lived at Central State Hospital for the criminally insane, and later Mendota Mental Health Institution in Madison, Wisconsin. Reporters described him as a model patient. He was quiet, polite, and cooperative. He spent his days doing chores, reading, and occasionally participating in recreational activities. To those who worked with him, he seemed almost ordinary. But the world outside never forgot the horrors of Plainfield. Gein's story became a cultural phenomenon. His crimes inspired some of the most iconic horror characters in American film and literature. Norman Bates from Psycho, Leatherface from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Buffalo Bill from The Silence of the Lambs. Each of these characters carried elements of Gein's twisted legacy. Back in Plainfield, his farmhouse did not last. After his arrest, the property became a magnet for curiosity seekers. People drove by, hoping to glimpse the place where the unspeakable acts had occurred. In 1958, just before it was to be auctioned, the house was mysteriously burned to the ground. Some people believe it was arson, an attempt by townspeople to erase the stain on their community. Gein himself never showed anger about losing the house. In fact, he reportedly shrugged it off, saying, "Just as well." His detachment from reality was striking. He rarely expressed remorse or horror about what he had done. He seemed more embarrassed at being caught than at the crimes themselves. As the years passed, Gein became something of a celebrity. Books and documentaries dissected his life, and journalists clamored for interviews. Some visitors even sent him fan letters. To many, this was disturbing, a reflection of how society can turn monsters into myths. But the victims were real. Bernice Worden, Mary Hogan, and the countless women whose graves were desecrated. Their names were often overshadowed by the fascination with Ed Gein himself, yet their lives and their dignity were stolen in ways that cannot be measured. In 1968, more than a decade after his arrest, Gein was finally declared fit for trial. He was tried for the murder of Bernice Worden. His defense argued insanity, and the jury agreed. He was found guilty but legally insane. He was returned to Mendota Mental Health Institute, where he remained for the rest of his life. Ed Gein died on July 26, 1984, at the age of 77. He was buried in Plainfield Cemetery, just a few feet away from his mother and, chillingly, some of the graves he had once robbed. Over the years, his gravestone was vandalized repeatedly. People chipped off pieces as souvenirs until the marker was finally removed. Gein's crimes changed America. They forced people to confront the darkness that could exist in rural communities, hidden in plain sight. They blurred the line between reality and horror fiction, inspiring decades of stories that continue to haunt audiences. But beyond the myths and movies, the story of Ed Gein is one of profound tragedy. It is the story of a boy warped by isolation and control, a man who never escaped the shadow of his mother, and a community scarred by the unimaginable secrets hidden behind a farmhouse door. Ed Gein's name will forever be linked to horror, both real and imagined. His crimes shocked a nation, inspired Hollywood, and left an enduring stain on Plainfield, Wisconsin. This has been Dark Minds, a series on Midnight Verdict, where we bring you the stories that shape the darkest chapters of true crime. Thank you for watching. All facts, no fluff. If you found this case compelling, hit like, leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe so you never miss the next deep dive into the shadows.